Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here today to share with you my Space2inspire story and just seeing if my slides advance. I don't think that the slide clicker is advanced. Oh, maybe I have to turn it on. Sorry about that. Nope, it's on. There we go. So it's really great to be here to share with you my Space2inspire story and talk about how last year really transformed my world in a way I never could have imagined. And we're going to get to this, overview effect that I got to experience. But to begin with, I'm going to bring you all the way back to where it began for me, and that is on the island of Guam. And the reason why I was born on the island of Guam is because my dad worked at the NASA tracking station during the Apollo missions. And so my family was on Guam from 1966 to 1970. And so they were there for when Apollo 11, Neil Armstrong took those first famous steps on the moon. And what's great about this is that I was born 8.5 months later. So I consider myself to be a moon celebration baby. I'm sure we have a couple of moon celebration babies here in the audience. Anybody? Anyone? No one? No one? Really? Okay. So I was born just after that happened. And then what happened after that is my family, they left Guam 2 months after I was born, and they moved away. We moved to Minnesota, and our family, my dad left NASA. But I grew up with NASA memorabilia to my father in the form of this Neil Armstrong autograph, along with other things. And so as a kid, I got to see things like this. And it made me dream about this, wanting to become an astronaut. So who here wanted to be an astronaut when you were a kid? Yeah, right? A lot of us had that dream of wanting to do this. Now, what's interesting is Dr. Mae Jemison didn't fly to space until I was in my 20s. And so when we think about representation and why representation matters, for me, when I thought about this, I saw it through the lens of a fighter pilot, the right stuff. And so as a kid, I thought, well, how do I become an astronaut? I loved aviation and airplanes, particularly fighter jets. So I thought, okay, I will become go to the Air Force Academy, become an F-16 pilot, and then transition to become a shuttle commander. But for a lot of us, those childhood dreams, things happen. And they slip away. And for me, even though I was in the Civil Air Patrol and doing all of these things, back then in the 80s, even though it was the Top Gun era, I got glasses when I was 15, 16, and then I knew there was no way I was ever going to be a fighter pilot. So the idea of becoming an astronaut just slipped away when I was a teenager. And so what happened is I went off and I became, make sure I'm pointing this at the right direction when I click. I became a geoscientist. Here, let me go over here. There we go. I became Dr. Proctor, and I moved out to Arizona State University. My dad, neither of my parents had college degrees, so it was one of those things where they were so passionate about me and my siblings getting as educated as possible, because my dad saw that as the way to get opportunity. And so I went off and I became Dr. Proctor, and I became a geoscientist, traveling and exploring our beautiful planet. But most importantly, I became a teacher. And I started teaching at South Mountain Community College in Phoenix, Arizona. And I've loved being there, teaching students and inspiring them about our world. But I'd never really given up that dream of going to space. And so what I want to share with you is, how did I get to this magical place last year where I got the opportunity to go? And now that I'm home, I've got the ability to have this perspective. I can look back at my career and think about, well, how did preparation and persistence and opportunity get me to where I am now, and what responsibility do I have as a result of this? So the first, to begin with, is preparation. And so again, thinking about my dad and how much he loved learning and was so invested in lifelong learning, and how he instilled that into me and my siblings, and just wanting me to go out and explore our planet. And so I got my Bachelor's of Science in Environmental Science. I got my Master's and my PhD from Arizona State University. But I really have been invested in lifelong learning my entire life. And the way I express that, and particularly to my students, is this whole idea of, well, if I want you to go out and explore our world, then I'm going to lead by example. I'm going to go out and explore this amazing world we live in, and then I'm going to bring it back to the classroom, and I'm going to show you that I'm out here doing it, you can do it too. And so I've traveled around the world, and I've participated in some amazing, experiences as a polar trek teacher and a NOAA teacher at sea and all of these things. But the core of that was to bring it back to my students and to inspire them to just fall in love with our planet. And then, at 38 years old, I got an email from a friend that said, NASA's looking for astronauts, you should apply. Now you can imagine getting that email and being like, you're thinking of me? Wait, this is amazing. But what's also interesting about that is when I got that email, I was like, how does NASA even pick astronauts? I was thinking about, like, this is something that had slipped away when I was 16 years old. And here, again, it's coming back to me at 38. And so I opened up the application, and I realized you have to apply through USA Jobs, and that you're familiar with USA Jobs? I had no idea. But then I was looking at the criteria, they asked for things like, are you scuba certified? Check. Do you have a pilot's license? Check. Do you have a master's or a PhD in science? Check. Do you speak Russian? No, not at all. But then they asked for cultural experiences, and I had traveled and taught around the world. And I sat there and I thought, they'll never pick me. They'll never pick me because I'm just a community college professor. And so this imposter syndrome voice came in and said, there's no way, nobody knows who I am. But when you suffer from imposter syndrome, and it's something that I've dealt with my entire life, you learn tricks to combat that. You learn ways to move forward, even though you have that voice inside your head that's fueling you with doubt, telling you that there's no way you're going to make it. And a lot of that comes in the form of my dad. My dad's voice I just remember as a kid, he'd be like, don't talk yourself out of opportunity. Let somebody else determine whether you're qualified. And so I decided to, go for it. I said, I'm going to just put my name in and see what happens. And then that year, 3,500 people roughly applied for the NASA astronaut selection process. And you can imagine my shock when I got notified that I'd made the highly qualified. And I was like, oh, wow, this is exciting, But then I was like blown away when they invited me for first round interviews. And I remember going to Johnson Space Center for 3 days. And in fact, this was the picture that was taken for the first round interviews. And some of you might notice that there are 2 astronauts in that photo. I'm standing next to Jessica Meir right there. And you get there, and you know what the first thing? You're in a crowd like this, the first thing that people ask you, what do you do? Oh, I'm a fighter pilot. Oh, I'm a research scientist at Harvard. Oh, I'm curing cancer, And then they get to you, and you're like, oh, I'm a community college professor in Phoenix, Arizona. And it's this interesting idea of learning. What I learned from this experience was learning to own who I am and be proud of the fact that I'm a community college professor from Phoenix, Arizona. And so I was surrounded by these amazing people in this amazing experience. And then you go home and you wonder, are you going to make it to the second round interviews? Because they've already told you they're going to only take a few people. And you start hearing that this person got an interview, a second interview, and this person, and you're thinking, oh, okay, it's over. I'm not going to make it any further. This has been amazing. And then one day the phone rings. And I remember because it was early in the morning, and and I picked it up, and I was thinking it was my mom, because my mom was the only person that called early in the morning. And so I was like, hello, and she said, this is Johnson Space Center. And I just remember going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. She's like, yes, we would like to have you back to Johnson Space Center. You're now a finalist for the astronaut program. And then you go for a week long down to Johnson Space Center, and you go through all this testing and all of these things and medical. And then you go home and you wait. And what's interesting is I was 38, it was July of 2008 that the application was due in USA Jobs, and it wasn't until July of 2009 that the yes-no phone calls came out. So a year later, you're sitting there and you're waiting, and then that phone rings one day, and it's a no. And you've come this close to reaching that childhood dream, that dream that you had of becoming an astronaut, and then suddenly it's a no. And you sit there and you think, you just think, wow, they figured it out. I'm an imposter. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I didn't do the right things, but I'm going to change that. I am going to make myself better. So I signed up for a master's in space science at University of North Dakota, even though I had a PhD. I told myself I was going to get my advanced scuba. I was going to get my commercial pilot's license. I was going to do all of these things. Now keep in mind, I'm 39 years old now. And I'm like, okay, I got to do all of these things to make myself better, because the next time, I'm going to get selected. And I was driving myself crazy. I was changing my whole world. And it got to the point where I said, I just got to stop. I have to stop. And I stopped and said, instead of being disappointed at the fact that I got a no, I need to celebrate that I was almost an astronaut. And so I changed this, and I thought, instead of being disappointed that it was no, I started to celebrate the fact that I was almost a NASA astronaut out of thousands of applications. And I had this amazing experience of meeting astronauts and being tested and even getting medical done. That's my brain. Does it look like me? They told me I was grossly normal. I don't know if that was a good thing or not, but it said grossly normal. And so I started to celebrate the fact that I had almost became a NASA astronaut. And that changed everything for me, because it gave me a way to move forward. I figured out how I was stuck in the situation of wanting this so bad and not knowing how to get it, but it was stopping me from moving forward. And so once I reframed my thinking, I was able to go and pivot and go back in from that disappointment, that persistence. I had to be able to get over this. And I repivoted to becoming an analog astronaut. How many of you have heard of analog astronauts before? Okay, some of you have. An analog astronaut is somebody who engages in the advancement of human spaceflight, but here on Earth. So we're the people who live in Moon and Mars simulations. And so this is the high seas habitat. It was built in 2013 on the big island of Hawaii. And in that year, they put out a call saying, well, actually in 2012, they put out a call saying they're looking for people to live in a Mars simulation for 4 months to investigate food strategies for long duration space flight. I got an email from a friend saying, you love space and food, you should apply. I love my friends because they send me things like this. And I sat there and I was like, I do love food and I do love space. I'm going to apply. And so I ended up being selected to be one of the crew members, the first crew members to live in the high seas habitat. And I thought to myself, I said, well, here I'm now in my 40s. And I said, even if I don't make it up there to space, I can still advance human spaceflight here, down on Earth, by participating in these kinds of things. And what I loved about this experience is that, you know, I lived in multiple simulations with different people from around the world. And a lot of it was about crew cohesion. How do we get along? How do we get along, not just up in space, but down here on Earth, when we meet new people and come together? And so the first one was my High Seas Habitat crew. I lived in the Mars Desert Research Station with them and High Seas for 4 months. And then I went to Poland to live in the Lunaris moon simulation for 2 weeks. And then I went back to High Seas in 2020, just before the pandemic took over. So this was January 2020, where I did the first all-female mission to High Seas. And all of this experience really got me thinking a lot about myself and the person that I am and the things that I do and how I impact other people in confined, isolated environments like space. And then what's interesting is that you're preparing and you're persisting through conflict and no's and things, but then you start preparing in your life and you're going down this path. And then one day opportunity comes along. And I remember distinctly that the last call for NASA astronauts came out in 2019. And a lot of people came up to me and said, you know, our friends reached out to me and said, are you applying? NASA's looking for astronauts. Are you applying? And I was 49 years old, and I said, no, you know, I don't think NASA's going to be the route for me if I'm ever going to make it to space. And I would say this. I'd say, but maybe one day commercial space, just kind of joking, like a decade away. Yeah, maybe one day commercial space, I will go up that way, not knowing that just around the corner was Inspiration 4. So how many of you watched the Super Bowl in 2021? I'm like going back, 2021. Okay, a fair number of you. Now, how many of you remember the Inspiration 4 commercial? Oh, wow. Yeah, raise your hand, look around, see, there's you. I don't have a TV, so I didn't watch the Super Bowl. But I have friends. And you know what my friends did? As soon as that Super Bowl commercial came out, they contacted me and said, you can win a seat to space if you donate to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. How many of you who raised your hand and saw that, did any of you apply? Did any of you donate? All right, we have someone right there. And so I thought, wow, okay, I can do this. I can donate to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital to win a seat to space and support a good cause. Now, what's interesting about that is that most people didn't realize that it wasn't just one seat. There were 2 seats that were being given away. And it wasn't until, now this was just the month of February. So the Super Bowl happened at the beginning of February, announcing to the world that the first all-civilian mission to orbit was going to happen, and you could win your seat to space by donating to St. Jude. And then about halfway through the month of February, I'm on Twitter, and I see a friend's video, and it talks about the prosperity seat. And I thought, there's a second seat? You can win a second seat? You're nodding your head. You're like, yeah, there was a second seat. And I was like, I got to figure out what this is. And so I did my digging, and I was like, wow, okay, if I showed my entrepreneurial spirit and opened up a Shift4 shop and you know, offered some kind of service, and I created a 2-minute-ish Twitter video and posted that explaining why I wanted the entrepreneurial seat, they were going to give this away to somebody. And so backing up a bit, 2020, January, coming out of the High Seas Habitat with the first all-female mission. I'm turning 50 in March. So I'm going to be traveling. One of my big birthday gifts to myself was I was going to travel to Nepal and hike to Everest Base Camp. I'd always wanted to do that. And then, as you all know, in middle of March, we went into lockdown because of COVID. And as a result, my #1 hobby went away, which was traveling as a geoscientist and seeing our beautiful planet. And I found myself in 2020, stuck at home in a marriage that was ending and not knowing what was going to happen with our world, right? And so I needed to figure out a way to be creative, to express myself creatively. So I became a space artist during that time, a space artist and a poet. I started making art. And during that, and it was really therapeutic to some extent because I had found my authentic voice through art and poetry. And so now, this is 1 year later in February of 2021 when Inspiration 4 came out with their announcement. And I thought to myself, you know, I tried to become an astronaut through NASA as a geoscientist and an educator. And I just felt called to myself that the way forward was as an artist and a poet. So I applied for the Inspiration 4 all-civilian mission to orbit as an artist and a poet by creating an original poem. And I want to share that with you right now. So this is my winning poem.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Sian Proctor, and I'm a geoscientist, explorer, and analog astronaut, and I have dreamed about going to space my entire life. I actually came that close when I was a finalist for the NASA astronaut selection process in 2009. But what I am most proud of is the fact that I have been a teacher at the community college for the past 20 years, and I have been able to inspire hundreds of thousands of students through my education and outreach. My entrepreneurial spirit lies in the fact that I combine space art with poetry, and my shop is called My Space2inspire, and I've written an original poem to share with you. You've got space, I've got space, we all have space to inspire. That's why we dream of going higher and higher. But what is space if you can't breathe? Let's stop sucking out the air of our humanity. We have a moment to seize the light, Earth from space, both day and night. We have J for justice, to ignite the bold. We have E for equity, to cut past the old. We have D for diversity, to end the fight. We have I for inclusion, to try to make it right. A Jedi space to rally behind. A universal force so big it binds. Inspiration to change the world. A new beginning for us to hold. It's not about you, it's not about me, it's about space to inspire for all of humanity. Science, technology, engineering, and math, sending us out on the explorer's path. But don't forget the arts, the heartbeat of time. Consider sending a poet who knows how to rhyme. So let's drop the mic and close the capsule door. But please make sure Dr. Proctor is on board. My Space to Inspire is what we need. Inspiration for all of humanity. I hope you will go out and use your unique space to inspire those within your reach and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you. So what I realized is that I had found my authentic voice through art and poetry, and I didn't even realize that it had been missing until I'd gone through this transformation. And when I shot that video, I must have shot that video at least 50 times before I was like, okay, I just need to put it up there and let it go. And I told myself that it didn't matter if I won or lost because I had already won by just creating that video and putting myself out there as an artist and a poet. And this is examples of my art that I did during that year of that first year of COVID. And so Inspiration 4 came together as the first all-civilian mission to orbit, and I got to join with Haley and Chris and of course Jared. Jared's thoughtfulness in putting together this mission. And what happened was the contest ended in February of 2021, and I found out that I won at the beginning of March. I found out the same day that Chris had won the generosity seat by donating to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And then at the end of March, we announced to the world that we had a crew that was going to go to space in 6 months. Now, what was interesting about this is When Jared told me on Zoom that I had won the prosperity seat, the next thing he said to me was, "And I think you should be my mission pilot." And I was like, "Say what?" You know, in my head, I was like, does he know I've only flown a Cessna 172? And that was like a decade ago. But you know, you sit there and you're kind of stunned because you just found out you're going to space, and now they want you to be the mission pilot, and you're like, yeah, okay, that sounds great. You're like, I don't know what that means. And so we went into training, and it was the most intense 6 months of my life because not only was I learning all of these new things of how to become a mission pilot, but it was also a situation where you can't get hurt, you can't get sick, you know, and you still have to qualify for your seat. SpaceX made it very clear that, yeah, you won a contest, but you still have to qualify as a mission pilot. And if you don't qualify, you don't fly. And so I spent a lot of time with Jared, my commander, learning about, you know, getting flight ready, learning about the systems in the simulator, doing crew cohesion and bonding exercises, and us really coming together so that we can be successful in this amazing endeavor of going to space as 4 civilians. And so we came together, and what was amazing is SpaceX, because we were not going to be docking with the International Space Station, they took the Dragon capsule and they modified it for us. They put a cupola or a giant window at the top of where the nose cone opens up. And that's normally where you would dock to the International Space Station. So they replaced this with this beautiful window. Because they were like, would you like to look down at our planet? Yeah, you know, put that thing on. You know, this has never flown before. Put that thing on, you know. And so we came together and we launched in September of last year. And when people ask me, what was the best moment about going to space? And what I realized is that it was this moment when we first got to see the Earth through the cupola. And I remember we were kind of like talking about how this moment was going to happen. You know, we practiced it in the simulator. And I took out my camera at that time. And they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, this is historic. We're going to have to document this. And so this is the video, the actual video I shot while we were in space and opening up the cupola. Now, I'm going to tell you that this originally had music with it, and it's from 2001 where it's like dun dun. But because of copyright issues, it no longer has the music. So I will narrate exactly what's happening as we watch us unfold this. So the forward hatch, it's funny because it opens really slowly. It has dampeners in it, and Chris is pulling it back, and Haley's going to start pulling out a ribbon because she has to put a protection around the forward hatch seal, and so that's her job. And I'm videotaping them while they're doing this, and I'm playing the music, dun, 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 you know? And so everybody's just really enjoying it. And you can see Haley here as she's pulling out the ribbon, but there's going to be a moment when she looks up, and Jared actually swears at that moment where he's like, holy bleep, and watch her face. That was pretty much all of us as we moved in, and through that window, we got to see our beautiful planet in a way, you know, none of us had ever seen before. And you can see we're all just kind of staring at it. But look at the capsule and look at how bright it got. I'm going to talk about that in a minute and what happened during that moment. But this was my favorite moment in space, was seeing my crew members and their expression and capturing this moment in real time with them and just having this. And so as a geoscientist, there are things that I kind of was already prepared for. And one of them was the overview effect. And how many of you have heard of the overview effect? Okay, a few of you have. The overview effect is a phenomenon that astronauts have reported that when they go to space, they get transformed. That seeing the Earth from that perspective leaves them feeling more environmental stewardship for our planet, wanting to go back and do good and to share this experience, this transformative experience they've had. And so going up to space, I was like, oh, wow, I'm really excited that I might experience the overview effect. And what would that be like? But what I wasn't prepared for was Earth light. Earth light. And so you're like, what's Earth light? Okay, so imagine moonlight. The other day, how many of you saw the full moon and the eclipse? Think about how that made you feel when you stepped outside, or any time when you step outside and you see the full moon rising, and you get bathed in moonlight, and you can go out and you can hike and walk within moonlight. Think about all the myths and the lore and the poetry and music and love songs and werewolves all around moonlight, right? Well, Earth light is 1,000 times more beautiful, more brilliant, more spectacular than moonlight. And you can see how my face is illuminated there. The Dragon capsule is designed where the nose cone, when it opens, actually blocks direct sunlight from coming into the capsule. I am being illuminated by Earth light. And when I realized that our planet, the reflectivity of our planet is so high, it is a giant beacon of hope and life, and it just glows. And then you think about moonlight. To put it in perspective, think about how moonlight makes you feel. And now think about how Earth light could make you feel. And how great it would be if we could all be bathed in a little Earth light. Our planet, seeing it from that perspective, it's just so beautiful. A lot of clouds. I got a new appreciation for clouds, but when we did go over land masses, it was funny because 90% of the time when we said, I see land, what are we over? And we'd go over to the computer, we'd float over, and we'd look, and we'd be like, Australia! And every time it was Australia. Except for that one time when we were over South America, and we got to see. And so as a geologist, being able to see these land masses, and because when we floated up into the cupola, this is another thing that I wasn't prepared for. So the cupola was domed, it came down to about here. And when we got up in there, we realized we could see the entire circumference of the Earth. It was out to here. We couldn't see it all at once, but if we spun around, we could see our entire planet on the edge of blackness around it, the space. And then off to the side was the moon. And so, and I'm looking up because our Dragon capsule, there's no orientation in space, but the capsule was pointed down in the Earth. But we had trained in the Dragon capsule with cupola up. So from our perspective, the Earth was above me. My brain, still working that out. Earth above me, space below, moon off to the side. But the beauty of our planet. And then the clouds. I got such a new appreciation for clouds and the fact that we live on a water planet and being able to see the oceans and the swirls and the low pressure systems developing. But then the beauty of our planet at night and seeing human-made lights in the form of the yellow, and then those white spots right there. If this was a video, they'd be going white, they'd be flashing all over the place because that's lightning from space. And being able to see the juxtaposition of nature and lightning with human artificial lights. And then, of course, having that family legacy and being able to do two things. One, Both my parents have passed away, so they didn't get to see me achieve that childhood dream of going to space. But I was able to bring them with me, particularly my dad in the form of the Neil Armstrong autograph and bringing that to space. And then I got to paint while on orbit. And so that's my Afro picture that I painted while I was in space. And of course, you go and you have this experience. You have been preparing and persisting for 50 years. And then you have this opportunity. You finally get that golden ticket. But then you come back home and you have this responsibility. You have a responsibility to make sure that you're not the last one. When I went to space, there had only been 3 black females who had flown before me. Mae Jemison, Joan Higginbotham, and Stephanie Wilson. And then I became the 4th. But now we have a 5th because Jessica Watkins is right now on the International Space Station. And so to have that opportunity to become part of this group that you didn't, you thought as a kid, maybe one day I will be there. And then all of a sudden you're there. And you come back and you realize that it's not just about the fact that you made it. It's the fact that you're part of a family and a legacy of aviation and aerospace that goes way back to 1921 with Bessie Coleman. And I think about what she had to do in order to get her pilot's license. She couldn't do it here in the United States. She had to go to France in order to be able to achieve her dream of becoming a pilot. And then to think that that was 1921 and the life she had in order to achieve that dream, and then 100 years later, for me to be able to become the first black woman pilot of a spacecraft. How lucky and fortunate I feel, and gratitude at being in this position to be able to take this legacy and use it to inspire people around the world, particularly women of color, to be able to think that they too can have this dream of going, whatever it is that their dream is, it's achievable. And so before going to space, one of my platforms has been, how do we create that Star Trek generation, right? Star Trek or Star Wars? Star Wars? Star Trek? Well, you can have both. We don't have to choose. We can have the Star Trek generation, right? That whole idea of us all getting along and trekking across the universe, but as a Jedi space, right? We do that through a just, equitable, diverse, and inclusive space. And so how do we make space for everyone? You hear that a lot, that, oh, space is for everyone. Oh, really, is it? How many people have flown to space? Raise your hand if you'd like to go to space. Okay, raise your hand if you think you'll make it to space. Okay, we've got some, and now that commercial space is happening, that possibility is a real thing. I jokingly would say, oh, I don't think, NASA, but one day commercial space. And then here I am standing in front of you as an astronaut who actually made that dream come true. So as we strive for becoming a Jedi space, the way that I am doing that, the way I'm promoting that is through my art and poetry. I found my authentic voice as an artist and a poet, and being able to express things that I couldn't express before. As a kid growing up, as from African-American parents and just the way the society was, I was taught, don't step out of line. Make sure that you assimilate. Make sure that you fit in, because it could get you killed. It could get you in trouble. It could get you, my parents were so worried about something happening to me. And then I realized, well, how can I express some of the things that are inside of me that I want out? And I realized through art and poetry that I could do that. I could be creative, and I could share these things. And so now when I think about where we are with space, and the history of space. And I think about NASA, you know, and going through the selection process and how it was exclusive and competitive, the best of the best. And how do you get to be the best of the best? And how hard that is. Particularly if we're thinking about that Jedi space, that just, equitable, diverse, and inclusive space for everyone. Last year, in 1 year, commercial space flew the oldest person, William Shatner. Captain Kirk made it to space. See, there's hope for all of us, right? But they flew the oldest person, they flew the youngest person, they flew a childhood cancer survivor who had a prosthesis in her leg. Individuals that would have never made it under the old space. But now there's a new space that we're striving for, and it's inclusive and it's complementary, and we're looking to create that Jedi space so that we can all be a part of this. And so my platform has always been Space2inspire, you know, and when I talk about Space2inspire, a lot of times people think I'm talking about outer space and how can we use outer space to inspire. But what I'm really talking about is this space, your space, the space you inhabit, the space that makes you who you are, the unique, wonderful space that is you. This is the most magical space that exists. It's everything that you are and everything that you do and dream of being. And it goes everywhere you go. And so your space to inspire. How can you use your space to inspire those within your reach and beyond? And as you're doing that, how do you make that space a Jedi space? Just, equitable, diverse, and inclusive, not only for yourself, but for those around you, those in your neighborhood, in your school, in your work environment, for our entire planet. Imagine what the world would be like if we all used our space to inspire and made that a Jedi space. So when we think about going off to the moon, Mars, and beyond, the Earth is already in that good position, right, of being a Jedi space. And so I want to thank you for taking the time to talk and to listen to my Space2inspire story. And when I think about myself and my history and the things that I've done as an educator, an explorer, an artist, a geoscientist, and science communicator, and a mission pilot, what it comes down to is a couple of things. One, the explorer within, and how we are multifaceted people, and that we have all of these gifts that we tend to be pigeonholed as a science communicator, or an artist, or a scientist. And I was so fortunate last year because I got my call sign. My call sign is Leo. And so a lot of times people say, well, Leo, what does that stand for? Are you, born in August? Are you a Leo? Who's a Leo here? You know what I'm talking about, astrology, right? And I'm like, no. And then they're like, oh, Leo, is that because it's for low Earth orbit? Because, you went to low Earth orbit? I'm like, no. And my crew members and team decided to give me the call sign Leo because they considered me to be a modern day Renaissance woman, a modern day Leonardo da Vinci. And so my call sign is that. And one of my big lessons when I think about students and talking to young people is that, there is art in science and there's science in art. We don't have to choose between these different things, and we don't have to label ourselves. We can have all of it, because we are multifaceted individuals. And so, how many of you seen the Netflix series? And so those of you that haven't seen it, it's on Netflix. It's called Countdown, and spoiler, we make it. We make it home. I think there's a few people out there that was like, I think they're crazy. If you were out, you might have thought, oh, first all civilian mission to orbit. But we came together as a crew, and we trained for 6 months, and we had this amazing, life-changing experience. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sian. That was wonderful. So now it's time for Q&A. We've got a lot of questions that have come in from the YouTube stream, and I want to remind folks who are watching online to put your questions in the chat if you have them. And if you're here in person tonight, we have a microphone at the back of this first area of seats here. And if you have a question, please line up at the microphone so you can ask that. And while folks, work up the courage to go to the microphone, and we hope you do, I'll start by asking you one of the questions from an online viewer.
Okay.
So one of our viewers wants to know, did your experience in Civil Air Patrol inspire you to continue your journey in an aerospace career? And if so, how?
That's a great question. Civil Air Patrol, when I was a kid, my dad knew that I wanted to be a fighter pilot. And so he found the Civil Air Patrol me, a fantastic organization. And I was in it from probably 13, 14 to 17. And one of the things that it taught me was about how to just be more disciplined in what I want to do, and being able to study, and being part of a team, and figuring things out like that. But when I got glasses, going into my senior year, a couple of things happened. I got glasses, and then my father was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and he ended up passing away when I was 19. And that kind of changed me a lot, and I ended up going off and becoming a geoscientist. But I never lost my love of aviation and aerospace. And so what I did was, after I got my PhD and became Dr. Proctor, I got my pilot's license, but I also became a senior member of the Civil Air Patrol, and I'm actually a major in the Sky Harbor Squadron in Phoenix, Arizona. So I'm still part of the Civil Air Patrol and giving back to that community with helping to, with the cadets.
Great. Again, there's a microphone in the audience if anyone has a question. Nobody has yet made their way there, so please do. We encourage you to ask questions. There's plenty online, though, so let me ask you another one. How many G-forces did you pull on the ascent? Was it like a roller coaster, or was it hard to breathe?
That's a great question. And so you think about roller coaster, and when you get to that apex and then you start to fall over and your stomach goes, oh, nothing like that. Instead, what's interesting is that when you're going and you feel the thrust in going through your chest, and you're accelerating, but it's kind of, you get that first initial kick when the engines fire, but then it's more of a gradual acceleration. And a lot of times people are asking, was it shaking and stuff like that? But it wasn't. It was actually a really smooth ride. I was actually surprised by that. But what was the difference is re-entry into the atmosphere. Man, that's a kick in the butt, right? So you get on orbit and you float, and it's amazing. But then you have to come back, and you're going at 17,500 miles per hour around the Earth, and you got to take all of that energy out through the atmosphere. And I just remember we're all strapped in, and we start entering the atmosphere, and you start getting the G count up. And 1 G is being here on Earth. And we get to like 0.3 Gs, and I hear Haley over to the side. She's like, oh, what is this? And it's like the elephant is already starting to sit on your chest. And you go up to 6 Gs, and it's a sustained 6. And I just kept thinking, oh, wow, okay, this is kind of cool, but wow. And you're pressure breathing. So it was actually coming back into the atmosphere that was a lot more, I felt G's, where it was a lot more pressure on the chest that was sustained.
We have a question from a young audience member, 10-year-old viewer, who wants to know if the pressure of wanting to be an astronaut ever brings you down from achieving your dreams. Can it get in the way?
I think that the big thing is to live the life that brings you joy. Because as a kid, I wanted to be a fighter pilot and an astronaut, and then that got derailed. But what I was able to do was I was able to find a life that gave me joy as an explorer. And what it came down to was that I realized that becoming an astronaut and going to space was just one example of exploration. And my entire life, I've been an explorer as a geoscientist. And so when people ask me, well, now that you've gone to space, what is there? There's nothing to top that. And I'm like, no, I've seen our planet from that perspective. And it just makes me want to travel more and to explore it and go down to the bottom of the oceans and go to the North and South Pole. And there's so much beauty here. And so when you're thinking about having this dream of being an astronaut and going to the moon, Mars, or beyond. It's a great thing to have, but what you really want to think about is, well, where's the joy in that? You can find the joy in that as becoming an explorer, or you can find the joy in that by becoming a problem solver and thinking about, well, what's the problem that we have to solve in order to go to Mars or to go to the moon? And then if you start investing in that, then that might be the ticket to get you there. But having that passion, becoming that detective, that is what's going to keep you sustained and not bring you down.
Great. I think maybe we have a question in the audience.
Is it on? Oh, cool. All right. Regarding your Jedi, the Jedi space, I kind of took that one in more as like a leadership, really inspirational. As I've really never thought about going to be an astronaut myself, but that's pretty awesome. And then what I think of more so is that Jedi space of how to incorporate that in everyday life. And like I was trying to visualize how to incorporate that in maybe my work setting and to relate that to how I can then inspire other people around me, being a leader in my roles. How would you suggest something like your platform, your Space2inspire, your Jedi, to go in other ways of, I'm just gonna say, I'm in the military, so I try to figure out ways to inspire junior sailors and try to get them to, hey, come on, keep going through and make it fun and make it interactive. And the way how you portrayed it out was like, I think I can use this in a way. And I was wondering just like, what would you suggest for other people trying to incorporate your platform outwards?
Well, I think part of that, and I really like what you're saying, is because that's what it's about. It's about us trying to figure out how to create a Jedi space within our Space2inspire. And one of the things way of doing that is by not doing it by yourself, bringing in your community or the group that you want to do it with. And so for me, I'll give you an example. If I had a classroom with students, I would talk to them about, well, you know, I want to do this Jedi space initiative, just, equitable, diverse, and inclusive. Let's talk about this. What do you, and then have a discussion. Well, what do you consider just to be? What would this space, our classroom, look like if it was a just classroom? And then once you get that worked out, then you say, okay, what about equitable? What does equitable mean to you or to you? You know, what would if our classroom was going to be equitable, what would that look like? And you go through each step and you talk about what it would be for you guys in your space, in your unique situation. Because your Jedi space doesn't have to look like my Jedi space. You can negotiate what that's going to look like, but you do it as a community, and you empower them to have a decision to make what that space is going to look like and what the rules are of engagement within that space. And so that everybody feels empowered and part of the solution.
I have a second question. By any chance, do you have a training platform on this? Because that sounds great. I would actually
Not
like
yet,
to learn.
But where's the patent office? No. But no, those are things that I just try to put out there so that people will think about them and implement them.
Great. We have time for a couple more questions, and we've got a lot of them from online. So I'm going to choose one and ask you, do you think that the privatization of outer space will continue to have a democratizing effect, or will it foreclose opportunities for those who can't afford or aren't qualified to travel to space?
I think that it's going to continue to democratize space. And the reason why is that I think that, one, the goal is to drive down the costs so that more access happens. But if you look at the reason why Jared set up Inspiration 4 the way he did was because he knew the importance of it being first. And if you could set it up where Solving for Space solves for Earth, we're going to donate, we're going to raise $200 million for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. We're going to have a diverse crew. We're going to fly people that you wouldn't normally have, and we're going to give seats away. 50% of the capsule given away, and then the other person, Haley, she was chosen from St. Jude. And so when you think about 75%, he could have easily said, I'm just going to fly my buddies. You know, I bought the capsule, I'm just going to take them along. But he said, no, I'm going to do this in this new way. And it set the bar high. And now I know friends. One of my friends is flying on Blue. She won a contest for Space for Humanity. And she's 26 years old, and she's going up on their next flight. And yeah, and so I'm so And I know other people who have entered contests to win their seat to space. And so if we collectively say we want this, that we want a Jedi space, that we want these space companies to be thoughtful about how they open up access and make them committed to creating that future that we want, that Star Trek future, where space is truly for everyone, then we can make this a reality.
And I think we have another question in the audience, and I think you'll be our last question for the evening.
Hello.
Hi.
First, thank you so much for this. This was absolutely wonderful. You're a fantastic presenter. So my question is, so you mentioned being an analog astronaut a couple of times, and then now you obviously have actually gotten to space. So other than gravity, what did you find actually translated the most and or the least between those two different experiences?
Crew cohesion, how you get along with others, and do you play well in the sandbox, right? And so what I learned from being in those analogs was how to get along with others. But it was more about my own personalities and my needs. Am I a morning person? Does the way my crew member chew drive me crazy? Or the way they walk, you got siblings and stuff, you've lived with other people. And so really understanding what you can tolerate, what you can't tolerate, and then being able to decide, because some people, they'll go and live in an analog and they're like, they're a terrible crew member, and they realize that for themselves, and then they're like, wow, okay. And then maybe they'll go work on some of those things to make themselves a better crew member. And so I think that that's the big thing that I learned was crew cohesion and just really understanding myself and how I am. I'm more of an introvert, and do I need my space when if something's happening and we've got like a big day, how do I unwind? Do I want to be with other crew members and talking? And it was funny, when we lived for 4 months in the high seas habitat, 3 introverts, 3 extroverts. And so it was really interesting, because my commander even said at one time, because one person was up in their room, and he's like, you need to come down and spend more time with, the crew. And how do you negotiate those kinds of things? And so when you're in a Dragon capsule, which is, this big, you can't get away from each other, you got to learn how to be able to interact in that environment and understand your crew member strengths and their tendencies, so that you can accommodate them, but they can accommodate you too.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sian, for a wonderful talk and a great evening. Let's all thank Sian for
Thank you.
Being so remarkable.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And I want to thank everyone who attended online and in person. Thank you for joining us tonight. You can tune in or join us again in person on June 29th for our final talk in the series, which is going to be about studying exoplanets in the search for new Earths, or understanding Earth better by studying exoplanets. And I last want to again thank our sponsors, United Launch Alliance and Aerojet Rocketdyne, for continuing to support this program and making this possible. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.